Welcome to the next episode of Did You Know? This is a series that you can find on YouTube under Did You Know MGT Live. Well, I have for years now had a fascination with the Griqua folk. My question has always been, how does a nation folk come into existence? Where does it start? My close friend is the Fleur, thus a descendant of die Knecht, Andries Abraham Stokkenstroom Le Fleur. But there is so much that I still want to learn about this specific group. So I'm excited to welcome my guest today. He is a representative on the Griqua National Conference, the leader of the National Khoisan Consultative Conference, and a member of the executive management of the National Khoisan Council. He is Cecil Le Fleur. Well, Cecil, this group that you are currently leading has a unique origin in the early history of the Cape Colony. So I'm hoping that you will have a lot to tell us. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Joleen. I agree that the group that I am part of and the group in which I play a leadership role is indeed a unique part of the South African broader community of peoples or nations, whatever you want to call it.
I'm just always concerned because the Griquas were once a major force on the South African frontier, and they occupied huge territories around Philippolis and so on. But then the group suffered a defeat at the hands of the Ndebele at Moordkop, and it is said that about 1,000 men died there. And then the Griqua just sort of faded from the history books, and I believe that now is the time to resurrect that history. Do you agree?
Yeah, I agree to a certain extent, because I don't agree with the fact that the Griqua people disappeared from the landscape. That, according to me, is not true. The Griqua had been there all along, and that happening at Moordkop, I don't even know if the number of people that died there are correctly recorded. But after that, a very important part of the Griqua history started. A very important phase when Adam Kok III were persuaded by Sir George Grey to take his people and to trek from the southern Free State across the Drakensberg, down the Drakensberg, and they passed a place which is called, after that trek, they call that place Oorlogsnek, which I think will mean a neck in the mountain where there actually happened a war. But those people were persuaded by Sir George Grey to move to a certain place in the Eastern Cape of that time. Now, in present day, it is part of KwaZulu-Natal. And that area was called No Man's Land.
Yes.
And they moved to that place, not out of their free will, but they were forced by the predecessor of Sir George Grey. And he actually forced Adam Kok to sign documents to dispossess them of their land in the Southern Free State. And to get rid of them, they offered them this land, this piece of land on the coastal side of or close to the coastal border of the Eastern Cape. Yeah, so that is, and from there onwards, the Griqua people had a very vibrant history in what later became East Griqua land. And from there, they moved back. Some of them moved back to the Western Cape, to different parts of the country, and East Griqua land is still there today. So I don't agree that they perished as a people.
Right. I think it's just that they sort of, we didn't learn a lot about the Griquas, in the history books. And that is what I actually meant. But I want us to start from the very beginning. Adam Kok the first. Who was he? Why did he start this group? What happened right at the beginning?
Adam Kok the first was a slave from Khoi descent in the household of the then governor of the Cape. And now I'm referring to a period he was born in 1710, so it must have been his father was also working as a slave in the household of the governor in the Cape Colony, not in the Cape Colony, but in Cape Town, which is today called Town. So he then got his freedom from that governor, and he also offered him a piece of land along the Burke River that flows from Drakenstein down to Veldrif. But the land is close to the town of Pakketberg, and on the banks of the Burke River, the Bergrivier. And that farm was called Stinkfontein. In English, I don't think there's an English translation, but it means it's a fountain that did not smell well.
Yes, exactly. These names that the people gave places was quite interesting.
So he then married into the Griqua people, which at that moment in time was called, or in history was called, the Khoury Griqua people. And they originally occupied the area between the Bergrivier, the Burke River. I mean, there's no word like Burke River, but the Bergrivier and the Olifantsrivier. And that is about 200 kilometers from the Berg River. You get the Olifants River, and alongside the same coastline, West Coast. So that was the original geographical area in South Africa that the Khoury Griqua people occupied. But then he persuaded them, and I'm telling this story now in a nutshell. Adam Kok the first persuaded the people in that area to rather move away to the interior of South Africa, because he came from the Cape Colony, he came from the governor's household, he knew how the people, the colonialists of that time, threatened the indigenous peoples and how they dispossessed them and how they took their land away from them. So he warned them and he said, let us move to the interior where we can still be a free people.
Right.
Practice our cultures and our traditions and protect our identity, which of course today we know that did not happen. But that trek started in 17 1734 to 1736.
2 years. Oh, wow.
People did not at that during that time just packed up and move, because they took with them their livestock and etc. So they moved then from there along the Cedarburg and the coastline up north, and so they crossed the Olifants River into Namaqualand, and from a place called Liliefontein on the mountains of the Kamiesberg Mountains, Namaqualand, they then moved eastwards to what is today called Griqualand West, and they occupied a town, or they established a town there called Klaarwater. Today it is called Griqua Town. It's still there, and it's called Griqua Town, but initially it was called Klaarwater. So that is, and from there another phase of history of the Griqua people started.
Right. So I want to come to the whole Fleur history a little bit later, but when Adam Kok settled there with his people, it is said that very little distinguished them from their fellow frontiers people. They were obviously pastoral. They wore the same wide-brimmed hats, and they also had firearms, and their whole life centered around the church. So is there something that is still left today? Is there a specific Griqua culture?
No, I once again don't agree. They, of course, they were horsemen. Adam Kok the First connected them with the Cape Colony of that time. The borders was still narrow. It was still not far from the Liesbeek River during that time, and in the Cape, where the Cape Flats is today. So Adam Kok connected them with the people in that area, in the then Cape Colony. So they got access to horses and gunpowder and guns and etc. And of course hats. I agree with that.
You have to.
And so they became horsemen, but they did not look like the Dutch people, of course not. But they still practice their own culture and traditions and etc. as they move northwards. But as they move northwards, the trekboere of the Cape Colony, when the British took over the Cape, the trekboere moved also out of the colony, and they joined the Griqua trek. Also, slaves that escaped from the Cape also joined. Malayan slaves joined the Griqua trek as they were going northwards. So these people became part of the Griqua people, and they mixed the blood of the Griqua people. So I think that was from the first intermarriages or mixture of blood that took place along the western side of South Africa at that time, and more to the interior. And of course, the start or it formed part of the start of this, what they called later Bastard Hottentots.
Yes.
And so these people then moved northwards, and of course the people who came into their midst, uh, namely the trekboere and the Malayan slaves, uh, they their cultures and traditions were also taken up by the Griqua communities.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it is obvious that it should influence the people's culture.
Yes.
And when I speak about trekboere, I don't speak about the groot trek.
No, 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 no. That was a completely different group. Yes, that's
Yeah.
right. I was, I always heard, and I mean, I think I read it in a few places, that when the people trekked, they had a very strong Christian foundation, and that when Adam Kok settled there, he actually wanted a missionary to come and join them. And then apparently the missionary said to them, but you can't call yourselves by the name Bastard, and you have to get another name. And that's how the name Griqua developed. Is
Yeah,
that story true?
that is true, but that did not happen in the early years, in the days of, or during the lifetime of Adam Kok the First.
Uh-huh.
Uh, that happened almost 100 years later,
Ah,
uh, in the town that I alluded to earlier, Klaarwater.
ah,
Uh, it did happen there when a lot of other Khoi groups also uh, trekked or migrated from the south to the north, away from colonial oppression. And
mhm,
all of them have heard about this big river uh, in the north, uh, which they call the Kai Garib, uh, and the colonists call it the Orange River. So they all moved to that towards that area because they were hunters, and there was a lot of wild animals in that area, in that river valley. Uh,
mhm.
Around Klaarwater, uh, a lot of other people moved in there and mixed with the Griqua people. And then the missionary uh, Campbell, the Reverend
Campbell.
Campbell,
Yeah.
he was sent by the London Mission, the London, what was it called?
London Mission Society, I think.
The London Missionary Society or Mission
Then
Society.
it- yeah.
Yeah, and in Afrikaans they call it the Londense Sendinggenootskap.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, so he was sent by that institution to do some religious work amongst the Griqua people. And so he found that it was not only Griqua people, but amongst them were that slaves and the descendants of that trekboere and
A jolly mix
a
of people.
jolly mix, and also of course other Khoi tribes.
Yeah,
And
that's right. That's right.
he said to them that you are now not called Khori Griqua anymore,
Uh-huh.
but you are a mixture of different groups, and you are called Bastard Hottentots.
Oh,
And what a nice name, according to him, to be called a bastard
yeah, thank you.
bastards.
Mm.
And so he persuaded them to uh, take on a new name instead of Griqua, to take on a name which they all agreed upon, uh, and that was Griqua, only Griqua.
Right.
Uh, the Griqua people form the core, the center of that group. They were the most influential among the group. They were the majority, and therefore all the others agreed to be called Griqua and not Griqua anymore.
Yeah, I see. So,
That
but
is that story.
that's yeah. So that's obviously how the Griqua folk started. I'm always
That
fascinated that yeah, I'm
that
always
is how
fascinated
it.
by the fact that there is a that there is a folk, because that for me gives a group of people an identity, with their own symbolisms and their own ceremonies, etc., etc. So it also has a little bit of a connotation of chosen people, that they did see themselves as a very special group of people. And I mean, because of my close relationship with some of your family, I really believe that this is a special thing, and that it should be protected. That specific culture that started in the early days.
Yeah, about the religion, uh,
Mm.
I cannot agree fully with the fact
Okay.
that they took on the church and they knitted their lives around the church. I think it was true, uh, because they always said that the missionaries came with the Bible into their communities and they left with title deeds of their lands.
Uh-huh.
So
Right.
they did not have, the Griqua people per se, did not have a good relationship with missionaries.
With the
Uh,
missionaries, no, definitely, yeah.
yes, yes, and
Um,
therefore I cannot agree that the missionaries transformed them into church communities.
ah,
That did,
okay.
if that happened, they would not call themselves a folk, uh, and because they they put the emphasis on folk, and they put the emphasis on their traditions. They put the emphasis on their leadership structures, and uh, the leadership structures of the church, but traditional leadership structures.
Uh-huh.
They put on that, and therefore they in the late uh, in the late history of Philippopolis, you will uh, the that the Griqua people established their own church.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, the Griqua National, the Griqua Independent Church, and
Yes.
uh, and therefore you can from that uh, you can see that uh, they tried to distance themselves from the mainstream churches and form their own church, the Griqua Independent Church. And the church is still there today, and I'm a member of that church.
Yes, exactly. No, I fully agree with you. There's a strong non-conformist thing anyway, that for everything. I was amazed when I visited Kranshoek at a stage, when they introduced me to their national anthem, or the Griqua anthem, and it was fantastic to see the people sing this anthem with so much energy and so much love and passion. So that's also when I learned, that they had their own monetary system, etc., etc. But before I get too deep into that, what was the relationship between the Koks and the Waterboers?
Uh, the Waterboer uh, was according to some of the historians, he was a teacher of that time amongst these San people.
Mm-hmm.
He was not really a Griqua. He was a San, and then the colonialists. But he obviously was a strong leader, and and maybe mixed between Khoi and San, and, and then he became the leader of a different grouping of the Griqua people, just like the Afrikaner trek, groot trek, uh, they broke to different sections, and
Yes.
the Griqua people did the same. And what is also very remarkable is that the Griqua people departed from the Cape in 1734 to between 34 and 1736, as I alluded to earlier. But the Groot Trek started exactly 100 years later in 1836.
Very
And
interesting.
that is interesting. It is remarkable because that make a statement. And the statement is that the Griqua people for the first 100 years were the only people who carried Western culture and Western lifestyle into the interior of South Africa long before the trekboere or the, not a trekboere, but the
Voertrek, ja.
trekkers came to the interior of South Africa. So the voortrekkers did not carry Western traditions and Western lifestyle, Western culture into the interior of South Africa. It is indeed the Griqua people who did it. The other groups lived up in the north in that interior, and they did not have the contact that the Griqua people had with the Cape Colony because they came from the Cape Colony. And they moved into the interior, and with them they carried this horsepower and not horsepower, gunpowder, and horses and rifles, and even in a place like Griqua Town, you get no, it's in Philippolis, I think. You will get the Bepehenno.
Right.
And in the museum there, brought into the interior by the Griqua people. You will also get the galg. I don't know what you call that in English.
We're struggling with the name now. Place where people are executed, yeah, right?
Yeah, that they bring that system into the area of South Africa. So, which is not a good thing, but at least it's part of history. we cannot erase it.
Right, exactly.
I
want to touch on,
yeah, I just wanted to make that clear that it was the Griqua people who carried Western lifestyle into the interior of South Africa.
Absolutely. So Waterboer and the Waterboers and the Koks were sort of a little bit of a split group. And today, are there more than one? Is there more than one group of Griquas?
Yes, there are. They are all Griquas, the same people, but they form different groupings. And Waterboer, as I've said earlier, were used were placed, let me rather say that, Waterboer were placed by the colonial government in Griqua Town. They recognize him as the leader of Griqua Town during their time. And I think it's a lot to do with the diamonds, the discovery of diamonds.
I want you to talk about that a little bit, yes.
Yeah, it was about the discovery of diamonds. And in history, you also read about the Keith court case, where in Afrikaans you say the Keith uitspraak.
Yeah.
And which that outcome court case was in favor of the British government. And they used, that is according to what the history says, Waterboer played a big role in the fact that they could win that case. So the Kok family split it away from Waterboer, and they moved on to Philippolis from Klaarwater, from which became Griqua. So
the Drakensberg.
Yeah, Adam Kok III was the leader, the captain of the Griqua people of their time in the Southern Free State. And he also moved with his people, the same leader, down the Drakensberg to no man's land. And he died in no man's land in 1875.
Nice.
So yeah, that era of Kok leadership during that time.
I was when I got to know Hazel, your cousin, or cousin.
Yeah.
I asked her, now, how did this whole thing of die knecht, the servant or die knecht, how did that start? And I was always fascinated, how did he get sort of into the Kok family? And then I saw his grave at in Hangberg, and then I saw that he married a Kok girl, a Kok woman. But tell us a little bit that he's your direct ancestor, Andrew Stokkenstroom Le Fleur.
Yeah, he is my grandfather, and he's buried on a hill called Robberg, and that is close to Plettenberg Bay, just on the outskirts of the town.
Yes.
He came into the history of the Griqua people in when he was born in 1867. He was the son of Abraham Le Fleur, and Abraham Le Fleur was a council member and a personal advisor to Adam Kok III during his reign in the Southern Free State in Philippolis. Abraham. And Abraham also one of the guys that was sent to no man's land just to find out if it is and will be conducive for them to move to that area. Will they survive there? What was the weather conditions, and how far was it to trek to that place, and how difficult would it be? So that few men were sent before the trek started, and to do exactly what I've said now. So yeah, Abraham was one of them, and but when the actual trek started in 1861-62, he did not trek with them. He moved back to the Eastern Cape of that time, and actually close to the Lesotho border, and in the trek started in 1861, and AAS Le Fleur was born in 1867, 5 years later, in a small Free State town called Rouville. The town is still there today.
Yes,
and
yes.
So he grew up there, and he went to very good colonial schools there in that area. And so in 1885, when Adam Kok the third died in 1875, his brother's son, called Adam Johannes Kok, Adam Meis Kok, he was one of the sons of Adam Eta Kok. Adam Kok III did not have children, so there was no heir to his or successor to his position. And
Mhm.
they earmarked the son of his brother and to follow up. But he was killed in 1878 in a rebellion against the British government. So he could not follow up. And then for the next few years, the people in East Griqua land, as it was called by that time, no more no man's land, it was called East Griqua land. And so after that, the people were almost without a leader,
I
leader
see.
people.
I see.
And their structures started to break down, and their leadership tarnished. So they actually their position deteriorated to an extent that the widow of Adam Koch III had to go to Abraham Fleur in the Eastern Cape of that area of that time, and ask him to come because he was the advisor of
Mm-hmm.
Edward III. So she had a belief that he could do something to uplift that people again, to unite them again.
I
And
see.
so he then moved to Kokstad. During that time, the town of Kokstad was already established.
Mhm.
So Andrew Abraham Stockmanstrom Fleur, the knecht, was a 16-year-old boy when he
I
into Kokstad with his father's horse cart. And his father always told him that the Griqua people are good horsemen. They are very good herders, pastoralists. They are rich people having cattle and horses and guns and gunpowder, and they lived a very good life in Philippopolis. So when he left the Griqua people in Philippopolis, they were people who adhere to what I was saying now. But then
Yes.
as they trekked down to no man's land, they lost almost
Exactly.
all the livestock.
Yeah.
They became already very poor as they moved down to no man's land.
It's
So, and Abram was not with them. So Abram still had this euphoria that these people, the people he left in Philippopolis, lived quite a good life. And he taught his son about this, how that people's
the
social
prosperous, yeah, the
life.
prosperous group. Yeah, I mean, obviously a
Yeah,
prosperous group. And now it must
yes.
have been a huge disappointment when he came there. And then I believe he felt that he had a calling to pull the people together again. That's your grandfather, right? The Knecht.
Yeah, but first it was my great grandfather Abraham.
I see.
Uh,
I see.
during that time that I refer to now, it was about him, not his son. And but then his son, and that's how he told the story afterwards. The son, that
Mm-hmm.
he was looking for his father's horses, not horses, cattle,
Mm-hmm.
in I think cattle or horses, yeah, in the Drakensberg. When that is when they already arrived in Kokstad and settled down on a farm between Kokstad and Matatiel, called Lefleerskop. It's still today called Lefleerskop. Uh, so they already settled there, and he was looking after his father's horses and cattle and etc. And so what he said afterwards was that he was lying under a tree or a bush there, and then he heard a voice calling him, and he responded to the call, and the call was, uh, uh, Andrew, Andrew, go, stand up, go and collect, not collect, what is the right word here? Versamel. Uh, in Afrikaans, we would have say, gaan versamel die dooie bene van Adam Kok.
That's right. Yes.
Enig hulle in 'n volk en ek sal vir hulle 'n God wees. And so he then was, of course, very shocked, very taken aback, of course, according to him, and he ran back to his father. And this voice also told him this vision that he got. Also told him that Lady Kok, that's the lady, the widow of Adam Kok III, who went to fetch them, their father, to come and help them, die the next morning. And he went to his father, and he told his father about this vision that he got. And according to oorlewering, what is that?
Yeah, well, what do you think is the history? Well, the oral history, basically, how people would
Yeah, you can find the correct word for that. But his father did not believe him, and but he was so persuading that that his father, in the end, did accompany him to Lady Kok, because they said then that they must go to Lady Kok, and they came there in the evening, and they stay over at the house of Lady Kok. And the next morning, and she was healthy, no problem. And the next morning, she prepared breakfast for them. And while they were sitting at the breakfast table, she just died. And then his father said, "But now I believe what you have said."
Oh my goodness, that is fascinating. We
That,
unfortunately running a bit out of time here, so I just want to tell people that don't know it that there are two actual places where the Griqua people gather regularly. The one is Kranshoek near Plettenberg Bay, where also the grave of the Knag actually is on Ropberg. And then there is another one on the west coast. What is it called? Ratelgat, is that right?
Ratelgat, yes.
Yes. So can tourists actually visit there? Can people go and experience a bit of Griqua culture?
At the moment, that place is closed because they are doing renovations, and it's not yet finished. It cost a lot of money to finish that place.
That's Ratelgat you're talking about.
That's Ratelgat, yeah.
Yeah.
Because and our people don't have that money. So what we've spent there is already a lot of money. But the government helped us, but now we cannot get further assistance, financial assistance, to complete the site. It's actually a heritage site. It's a cultural site.
But they can go to Kranshoek, right? They can
go to Kranshoek. Yes, they can.
I mean, those two places are very important places for the Griquas, as far as I've learned. And so, yes, one can go and visit that. And I'm sure there are people in Kranshoek that will actually also tell the stories of many of their ancestors. But it's been a fantastic honor to speak to you, Cecil, today, just to meet another Fleur. And I've got so much respect for also the prophecies that the Knag actually spoke about the Griqua people. And I believe many of them have actually come to fruition, and they actually are true, and they have happened, many of them. So I am still very, very intrigued with what the Griquas added to our culture. So thank you
Can
very,
I
very much for being here.
can I
Yes,
just before we close,
yes.
can I just say that that prophecies is in a book, and we captured 95 of them in that book, and it was written by and compiled by Dr. Villa Busak. We also have a book called Griqua Hero, and the whole story in this book is about the Knecht, AAS Fleur, the so this book and the book on his prophecies is available for people who want to read more.
And so what is the title of the book?
Can you see the book? Greek
Can you
Hero.
see? Yeah. Oh, I see. Right. Yes. Griqua
Greek
here.
Hero.
Good.
There, I'm lifting it up now, and there you can see him standing.
And this is available, you say?
This is
Quite
available.
fantastic. Well, there you go, people of South Africa and guides as well. That is a book that you can get hold of and read more about this fascinating fall, the Griqua fall. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.